Hey everyone, welcome back to the Roto Grinders Morning Grind Podcast. I'm your host, Stevie TPFL. It's Wednesday, May 11th. We got a split slate on the schedule today, so I'll be taking the early games, and Dan will be handling the late slate on the Fantasy Fix podcast. When you click the podcast button or you're on iTunes or Stitcher, it'll be right in that feed right after this one, so make sure you guys check that out. Dan will be handling those late games. He'll have a lot of information about those. Jeff El Jefe is my guest today. How you doing today, man?
What is up, buddy? How are you doing?
I know you got a little bit of sweat going on here in the Playboy queue, so I'm hoping as we're recording this, we'll get the stress levels down a little bit, and you'll take home another seat.
So, yeah, I'm first in the Playboy, and I'm third in the Monsters. The Monsters 75K. That one is one I'm sweating a little harder, but I'm going to need a big finish from my boy Todd Frazier, who came through for me yesterday, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, Frazier hits a home run, I'd have a chance to win the Slugfest on DK, so we're not going to be watching a lot of Frazier at bats, so hopefully when we jump off this podcast, hey, Frazier, hit a home run for us while we're doing this. It wouldn't be the first time that me and Jeff had success when we're working together on the podcast, so it would be nice to have another one. We're presented by FantasyDraft.com. If you guys haven't gone over to Fantasy Draft yet, check them out. It's one of the sites that you're not competing against a lot of entries. They have good max entries. They have a lot of stuff for cash games, a lot of stuff for tournaments. Nightly qualifiers and satellites into the big tournaments like on Friday. If you haven't checked them out already, check them out. Use promo code GRINDERS, and you'll get $180 incentives for free for a year over on Roto Grinders. A lot of great content in that. So, and you'll get a 100% deposit bonus up to $600. So that doesn't suck. So make sure you guys check them out over on Fantasy Draft. Jeff, we got an interesting 7-game morning slate here. We got some 1 o'clock games, some 2 o'clock games, and a few 3 o'clock games. So a lot to talk about here. And we're going to start it off with the Padres and the Cubs. Right now, from what I'm seeing, it's going to be Colin Ray and Kyle Hendricks in this early game. They're playing a day-night doubleheader, so it'll be interesting to see who's in the lineups for these. For the most part, for the early game, you would expect them to have their normal lineup, wouldn't you?
I would, and I think the most interesting thing about this game is, of course, the wind. So we don't know the night before what the wind is going to be like, but for instance, Vegas opened this up as a 7.5 projected total, and then they quickly pulled that because I think they're wondering what's going to happen with the wind. So the wind's blowing out. I think you certainly need to look to a lot of these hitters, especially on the Cubs side. If the wind's blowing in, maybe you can look at a guy like Hendricks, who's a minus 230 favorite.
Yeah, Hendricks is the guy that I definitely want to talk about. Right now, from what I'm seeing, we're recording this podcast the night before. The wind is 5 mile an hour blowing in from center field. That's not enough to even worry about anything. So, anything can change, especially when it comes to wind and weather and stuff like that. But I feel like Kyle Hendricks is one of the top pitching, arms on the slate here. I like him a lot here against Padres.
He is. He's one of the better pitchers on the slate, actually, of the whole day at limiting hard contact and inducing soft contact. And that's good, especially considering the team he's facing. He's facing the Padres. So that's a pretty good matchup in general. So I would really like the way it shapes up. Of course, there's precipitation concern as well. We hope that this game gets in, or both games get in, actually. You mentioned this is the first game of a doubleheader. So, I would definitely like Hendricks if there weren't any rain concerns.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Colin Ray on the other side. Colin Ray is an interesting option here. He's coming off of a really good game against the Mets. He pitched well against the Dodgers. And, 2 starts ago, he pitched good against the Pirates. So 3 of his last 4 starts have been quality outings. And I just don't know if this is the matchup that you want to target him here against a Cubs offense who is really solid. They're number 3 in WOBA against righties this season, and their WRC plus is 117.
I don't think I'm touching Ray regardless of what happens with the wind. But again, if the wind is blowing out, I definitely would be going after some of these Cubs. So no interest in Ray for me, but load up on those Cubs if the wind's blowing out.
So let's talk some of these Cubs. When we're looking at the slate, it's a really interesting slate. When we're looking at pricing, the Cubs bats across the industry priced up. Is this a spot that if the wind is kind of neutral, let's talk wind neutral, because I feel like if the wind's blowing in, we're not going to be paying up for these guys. If the wind's blowing out, we're going to want a lot of exposure to these guys. So let's talk wind neutral. The pricing on these guys are up there. What's your thoughts?
I like them. Of course, the wind blowing out, you would target guys that hit the ball in the air. If the wind is neutral, that's less of a concern. I just don't see it being neutral. It's going to be blowing pretty hard either in or out, I think. So that said, guys like Dexter Fowler, it's basically the top of that order: Dexter Fowler, Hayward, Rizzo. And then you look at what Colin Rea has done, of course, in a small sample size in his career. The right-handed bats so far have done really well against him, better than the lefties. So I don't think you'd need to shy away from a guy like Chris Bryant playing third base there either.
Now, is there any of these Padres that you want to target here against Hendricks? When we're looking at Hendricks, when he struggles, it's against lefties. He's really, really good against righties. Not going to see a lot of lefties here outside of, John Jay, which I don't even think John Jay is even worth talking about.
He's not. According to the Roto Grinders page, they project John Jay leading off and then Brett Wallace batting cleanup as the only lefties in this lineup, which is, again, another thing that makes Kyle Hendricks so attractive in this matchup. And yeah, there's not a single guy that I could look at and recommend as a singled out guy.
Yep, definitely agree. Baltimore at Minnesota, Phil Hughes and Tyler Wilson. Tyler Wilson's an interesting guy. He has a lot of ground ball. His high ground ball rate is really interesting here in this matchup against Minnesota at Minnesota. What's your thoughts here on Hughes and Wilson?
Well, this is a game projected at 9 with Hughes barely a favorite. He's minus 115. So I think that you can look to hitters on both sides. Hughes is kind of an interesting tournament play, I guess. He, being at home, you would think that he has a decent shot at getting a win, but I think that the Orioles, too, have a good shot at hitting some home runs against the guy. So he's a total boomer bust guy. I think that they're going to hit multiple home runs against Hughes, or Hughes will do a good job at inducing some weak contact. And, it's basically going to be that. I don't think it's going to be kind of a middling performance from Phil Hughes. He's a GPP guy.
Yeah, I feel like this is an interesting game. Where I want to target is Machado, Trumbo. Those are the two bats that I like the most. And in the tournament, I love Jonathan Scope. I talk about him on the podcast all the time. I love him against righties that struggle against righties, and that's Phil Hughes. High home run rates against righties, and Jonathan Scope's a guy that could definitely take him deep here. What's your thoughts on Scope, Machado, and Trumbo?
I like Machado and Trumbo. Scope is okay. He bats low in the order, which is, I typically don't love doing that, going after guys at the bottom of the order unless I'm doing some sort of a wraparound stack or something. But Machado, again, hit a home run again tonight. You and I have talked about on the podcast previously how good Trumbo's numbers look and how he projects to do while moving forward, I think. So those are the two guys you want. I did a show with Hoop today and talked about how I'm off of Adam Jones for a while now. I didn't see what he ended up doing tonight, but he just doesn't look right. And I think even despite the really cheap price, I think he's like 2.3K on FanDuel. I'm going to pass on him for now.
Yeah, he hit a home run. I feel like you can still fade him and be okay. One thing that I do want to note here, like on DraftKings, and I did it, the team that I have that I'm kind of sweating here in the Slugfest while we're recording the podcast, I played Machado at shortstop, and I was able to fit in Machado and Frazier and get the low ownerships. And I feel like that's a way that you can go kind of contrarian without having to be, taking 3%, 2.5K guys. What's your thoughts on that kind of strategy?
Well, hang on. You said Adam Jones did hit a home run tonight? Is that what you said?
Yeah, he did hit a home run.
Okay, well, that's interesting to me because I pretty much said I want to see him show some power. And then what was the second question you had?
I said that, like, on DraftKings with the multi-eligibility, Fantasy Draft discluded this first two games. So, but, like, I played Machado at shortstop on DraftKings on Tuesday night and was able to put Frazier at third base and kind of fit in two third basemen to kind of be contrarian. I just wanted to get your thoughts on doing something like that.
I don't mind that. Siege gave me a hard time the other day ranking Machado as a third baseman when he said I would only play him as a shortstop, and I didn't really think about it that much. Like I think of Machado as a third baseman, so I had him high in my third baseman rankings. Siege had him high in his shortstop rankings because there is a lot of value in playing a guy like Machado at shortstop because third baseman in general, it's just a deeper position and there's a lot more upside there. So I totally see that side of it. I like that way of being contrarian. Like you said, I don't know that most people think to do that. And I do think it boosts the value in your lineup.
Now, when we're looking at the other side of the hill here with Tyler Wilson, when you're looking at him, his stats, he gets a really really high ground ball rate to lefties, but struggles with righties. When we're looking at Minnesota as a whole, they're really right-handed heavy. Park, Sano, Plouffe, their power comes from the right-handed side outside of Arcia. Do you want to target some of these guys against Wilson?
Not really, because Wilson overall has done well at inducing soft contact. He's third on the slate, 26.9% soft contact rate. The only guys higher are Scherzer and Hamels, and that's counting all the pitchers throwing today, the early slate, late slate combined. So yeah, typically if I'm going to stack against a team or attack a pitcher like that, I want guys that are going to give up a lot of hard contact. So not looking to stack against him here.
Yeah, the only guy as a one-off play that I'll play here in the tournament is Park. Just elite power from what we've noticed so far to start this season, and then what we've kind of heard from him coming from overseas. So if I'm going to target one guy, it's probably going to be Park. He's 3,500 on FanDuel. Probably going to be really low owned, and that's what I like to see out of first basemen with upside. So moving on to this 5-game turbo slate on Fantasy Draft, and these next 5 games are part of the 2 that we've already talked about on FanDuel. We got Chicago White Sox at Texas, hoping the weather is going to be fine in this game. And in the afternoon game, we got Cole Hamels and Matt Latos. Latos, I've stacked against him every start, and I'm not going to stop now. What's your thoughts on Latos and Hamels?
Latos is a candidate to regress pretty heavily here, of course, so I don't mind that strategy at all. I haven't seen the total in this game. Do you know what it is at?
No,
the Vegas.
I haven't seen it either.
Okay, I just pulled it up. So it's total projected at 9 with Hamels as a -140 favorite. So again, it's Vegas telling us that it's going to be a high-scoring game. 9 is a very high projected total, and the Rangers are the team that Vegas is saying is going to have the better end of that, which is basically what you're saying. So that makes sense. I do think this is a very stackable lineup. You've got Odor there batting at the top of the order that has a lot of upside, I think, and fills a tough-to-fill position. Second base is usually pretty tough. And, you can go find quite a bit of upside all up and down this lineup.
Yeah, I like this lineup a lot when we're looking at, cash games and tournaments. I feel like there's some good value here. Prince Fielder, what's your thoughts on him? What we've seen last year, at least, he was hitting around the 300 mark for most of the season. This year, no power and not hitting around 300. Is this a spot that you might target him?
Yeah, I guess you can. He's pretty much the same guy as last year, right? You figure he's going to come around eventually, and against a pitcher like Latos in a ballpark like Texas, it's good for left-handed power. Yeah, it would be a good spot to go after him, and on a short slate at first base position is going to be relatively lowly owned. So if you can be contrarian in a matchup like this with a guy like Fielder, certainly worth a look.
Thoughts on Cole Hamels here against the White Sox offense?
I like it as a tournament play. I think that there obviously are a few strikeouts in this White Sox lineup. And if you can get around some of their big guys, it's basically Jose Abreu and Frazier, the guys that scare you in this lineup. If you can get around those guys, you don't see too much trouble for Cole Hamels. What do you think about Cole?
Yeah, everybody keeps mentioning Abreu, and I've watched him against lefties this season, and from what I've seen, he's struggled. I expect him to get better, but a pitcher like Hamels, who is a really good pitcher when we're looking at this slate, you mentioned hard contact a lot. We're looking at Hamels, who has a 26% hard contact rate to righties, and when we're talking, White Sox, we're talking Frazier, Abreu, Garcia. That's the 3 power bats. If he's able to limit those guys, I think I'm on the same page as you here. I think he's a good tournament option.
Yeah, I referenced Cole Hamels' soft contact briefly before, but 31.9 soft contact. That is quite a ways above the next guy, Max Scherzer, 27.1. So that tells you he does a good job of limiting damage when guys do make contact. 18.1% hard contact is, again, the lowest on the slate. So I like Cole Hamels.
All right, so we mentioned that we like Hamels. I'm not afraid to take guys like Frazier and a Garcia against him. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've got a bit of a history this week, a brief history with Todd Frazier. Got in an argument on one show about him, and now I've got a big sweat with him tonight. So this week is turning into Todd Frazier week for me. I go on and win the Mansion seat, and then finish highly in this monster tournament. I guarantee you it's going to be because of Todd Frazier, and I will be rolling him out again today in the next slate.
Yeah, I hope that you get that home run because moving up slowly with Smiley pitching well here. So, I'm hoping that you get that home run from Frazier as well. Cleveland heading to Houston to take on the Astros. We're going to see Doug Fister in this game, one of the top targets as far as hitters go. But I want to get your thoughts on Salazar. Houston is an offense that more and more as the season goes, I haven't been targeting them because this offense is just so talented. So, like even Kluber the other night, I mentioned on the podcast, I wasn't going to go Kluber just because even though they strike out a lot, there's a lot of talent. So you could see a game where they could have maybe 8 strikeouts, but they're still going to score maybe 4 or 5 runs. So what's your thoughts on Salazar here?
You make good points, but I don't mind him in tournaments because there are outcomes where Houston is not going to score a lot of runs, and in those outcomes, you project that they will have struck out quite a few times. And when you are playing GPPs, you are hoping just for not like the most likely outcome, but a likely outcome based on your probability, ownership percentage, all that stuff that can create enough upside for you. And I do think that Salazar has plenty of upside to warrant using him against the Astros here. Of course, the ballpark's tough and all that, but I actually think the Indians have a pretty good chance to win this game. Vegas has this as dead even, no favorite here. Both teams are minus 110. Total's projected at 8. And I'm also going to be loading up on some of these Indians bats too.
Yeah, I like the Indians' bats here. Doug Fister's a guy, when we're looking at his stats, to lefties dating back to last year, 331 WOBA, 31% hard contact rate. And it's not any better against righties, 345 WOBA with a 29% hard contact rate. So when we're looking at Indians' bats, there's a lot to talk about. So I'll let you lead it off. What do you like for the Indians?
Well, Hoop and I talked about this today on Grinders Live, how we're kind of waiting for the Indians to break out a little bit, how they've been in a couple really good spots and we've been on them and they've disappointed, but that doesn't mean we're going to stop and give up on the Indians. Tonight they scored 4 runs. The top of that order did okay, nothing crazy, but I do think pretty soon here we're going to see the upside. And the guys that I'm looking at and have been looking at for a while now are Kipnis, Lindor, Santana. I think Brantley's going to be back in the lineup again. He got the night off tonight. So like those 4 guys are certainly interesting to me. And then the interesting thing is Napoli versus Santana. They both play first base on FanDuel. So you have to make the choice between them. Both guys, you can make the case for both guys. So I don't think there's a wrong answer there, but maybe go after, consider everything, the ownership percentage and your projections and everything, and make sure you get that one right because that's the tough one.
Yeah, when you're looking at it, Cleveland's on the road here. I feel like Santana in the leadoff spot might have a better chance to get that 5th at bat, and maybe that could be a deciding factor for you. 20% more chance at run production points, however you want to look at it. That's how I weigh some tiebreakers from time to time. I agree with you. I feel like they're both in good spots. Every day I mentioned 3 guys on Fantasy Draft that I feel like are value plays that you want to play in cash games, and one actually comes from this game, and it's Lindor. I feel like he's a great cash game play on this slate. He's only 7,500 over on Fantasy Draft, so this is a good spot to target him in cash games. Is there any of these bats that you want to take against Danny Salazar?
I always play the Astros in tournaments. I mean, I've told you before, if you find a lineup of mine that doesn't have the Astros in it, if you go through all my lineups and can't find with Astros, that means Astros aren't playing. I've said that a few times now because it's true. Like every single day, tonight included, I've got an Astro stack somewhere just because there's so much upside with the speed, with the power. There's so many different ways to stack it. It's really easy to be contrarian with it because of all up and down that lineup. There are different directions you can go with the wraparounds and, going 1 through 4, 3-5, whatever. There's a lot of different ways you can go. So I will always have a Astro stack, today included.
Yeah, when you're looking at Salazar, really decent strikeout rate. Definitely a guy that limits right-handed power as far as WOBA and hard contact rate goes. So I don't mind Salazar, but man, I like the Astros stack a lot in this game. I love Springer. I love Correa, Altuve. All these guys are in play for me here. Any other thoughts before we move on?
No, but our boy Frazier got a walk and a run. They walked him and didn't let him hit. That would have been nice, though, because there were runners on. But just to keep you updated, I know you're sweating our boy Todd Frazier as well on your lineup.
Yeah, I'm 25th, 17 points back with Smiley and Frazier going.
Yeah. All right. Good luck, man.
Yeah, I know it's hard to do the podcast when you got a sweat going. But, if I'm doing the podcast and I win $50K, it wouldn't suck. So we're gonna move on to Coors here, Arizona at Colorado. Robbie Ray, Chad Bettis. I'm sure you're on the same page. We want nothing to do with the pitchers here.
No, and just because they got off to the pitchers in this game tonight got off to a good start doesn't mean that on Wednesday they're going to get off to a good start. I think I'm going right back to the hitters in this game, and I don't think I'm going to be alone.
Yeah, the pricing is really interesting on Fantasy Draft. I want to touch on that real quick. Carlos Gonzalez is $7,600 on Fantasy Draft. It's a lefty-lefty matchup. That's too cheap, right?
Yeah, you could go that direction for sure. I mean, pretty much everyone's in play,
Yeah. All right, so let's talk hitters in this game. Let's pinpoint a couple of them. You can talk hitters for days when you're talking Coors Field. So let's pinpoint a couple. Robbie Ray, lefty righty. So we want to target the righties here for the Rockies. Ryan Rayburn's instantly the first guy that stands out for me.
That would be a good guy. He's going to be a little bit cheaper. I do think he'll be fairly popular, though. I don't mind going with the lefties because, again, if you think this game is going to shoot out, it doesn't matter who starts the game. There's plenty of right-handed relievers that these Rockies are going to face as well, and that's where you could get into concern with Ryan Rayburn and that he might get pinch hit for eventually. So, yeah, I would be more focused in on the guys that are going to play the whole game despite whatever relievers come in, because I think this is going to get back to the shootout that we expected in Coors Field the night before, tonight.
Yeah. With Blackmon being back, I think you make interesting points. Rayburn wasn't getting pinch hit for a lot against lefties earlier, but I feel like it had a lot to do with Blackmon being out. When you were talking about it, I realized that. And it kind of changed my mind on Rayburn, and that's why we do the podcast with me having a co-host, and I love the points there. Like Story, Arenado, definitely guys you want to look at. Cargo, and if Blackmon's in the lineup, any of those guys definitely good plays here. If you get any cheapies that maybe because it's a day game following a night game and they're up towards the top of the lineup, definitely plug them in because they're going to be so popular. Arizona bats here. Love Jake Lamb, under 4K on FanDuel, and as he continues to show against right-handed pitching, he has the upside.
Love it. Yeah, they're batting him right in the meat of that order too a lot. So he'll probably bat, fourth or fifth, something like that, and there's a lot of value in him. It's interesting because there's been 3 third basemen to choose from just in the Coors Field game lately. So, again, we're going to run into that. So what that does is it makes them all a little bit lower owned. So if you can pick the right one, if there's one you feel really good about, you don't have to worry as much about ownership as you would otherwise. Because Arenado, Lamb, and who's the other one? Is it Drury, the third baseman on FanDuel anyway? Yeah. So it's like, Drury bats second too, and I think he was the highest owned out of all the third basemen today. So, it's if you can find the right one or a guy that you're in love with, don't worry about the ownership percentage too much here.
And before we move on, the second fantasy draft play that I feel like is a really good cash game play, it's Carlos Gonzalez. I don't know how much I'm going to be playing him in tournaments over on Fantasy Draft, but at that price tag in cash games, look past the lefty-lefty matchup and hope for the 3 at-bats late in the game against righties. That price is just way too cheap for Carlos Gonzalez. Is that crazy, calling him a cash game play at that price?
I'm a little concerned with his production lately, but if the price dictates it, then absolutely, it's a game in Coors Field where we're projecting. I think we both are projecting it to be kind of a bullpen game, and the Diamondbacks bullpen is not something you got to worry about in Coors Field. So, no, I don't think it's crazy to call any of these hitters in Coors Field cash game plays.
Yeah, we'll probably see a few innings from Delgado, some of these other guys that we see that can give up some runs. Tampa heading to Seattle to take on the Mariners. I don't even want to talk about Chris Archer after watching Drew Smyly's first inning.
Oh, man. Yeah, I feel for you. That's rough when you've got a Sweat in a really good spot to take down a lot of money, and the guy who you probably felt like was your safest bet tonight ends up just crushing your dreams in the very first inning. So I feel you, man. Like I can empathize with you a little bit for sure. That said, it's DFS, it's daily fantasy
Of
sports.
course.
We need to move on from the previous night. You know that. And you're able to do that. That's what makes you such a good player. But Chris Archer's had his own concerns. We've seen him get blown up at times. The thing is, the matchup is just really good. In Seattle, it's a pitcher's park. The Mariners lineup isn't extremely intimidating either. So Chris Archer's probably going to be a popular cash game play tonight, right? Or tomorrow day.
I would think so. When we're looking at Archer, massive strikeout rates against lefties, 29.3% dating back to last year on a 129 inning sample size. That's a pretty high sample size. Man, that strikeout rate is definitely something that's enticing because you know Nelson Cruz is still a good hitter regardless of who he faces, if it's lefty or righty, but they're going to throw a lot of lefties at Archer here, and I'm hoping that the hard contact rate will be kind of neutralized a little bit by the ballpark. And I feel like Archer is definitely a guy that I'm going to look at. And on a site like FanDuel, if the weather's okay in Chicago, I still think I'm going Hendricks and cash, but Archer probably one of the highest upside plays here.
I agree. And, of course, there's a pitcher in the last game that we're going to talk about that's pretty interesting as well. So, yeah, Archer's just one of the top options in consideration. I do think you can stack against him, too, just because we've seen the blow-up potential. He does lead the entire day of games, both slates, in hard contact rate. Chris Archer does. So, it's interesting to stack against him. Maybe if you're running a bunch of teams out there, certainly not if I have a single entry. But if I'm running 10 to 20 teams, I'm stacking against Archer tomorrow.
Yeah, it's game theory. It's a 7-game slate. You're not going to get many popular or unpopular stacks with upside, and you make some good points there. What's your thoughts on Walker here against the Rays, who they haven't been that good against righties this season? When we're looking at the stats against righties, they are bottom 5 in WOBA, 27% strikeout rate against righties this season. Walker has flashed some upside. What's your thoughts on him?
That's the thing is I think Walker's a little bit safer, actually. Again, this is a game without a favorite. Both teams are minus 110. Total's projected at 7, so it's going to be a low-scoring game is what Vegas is telling us. And the Rays, there's just it's a better matchup, I think, for Walker. So I think you can go there. Obviously, you get a discount, more of a tournament play. I don't think it's extremely safe. I think he's safer than Archer, but yeah, certainly a guy to look at.
Yep, definitely a guy that I'm going to be looking at here. So let's talk some bats. Honestly, I think outside of a Seattle stack in a tournament where you're running multiple teams, I don't want a lot to do here.
That's exactly how I feel. Yeah, you could stack either side, really. I would lean towards Seattle, but I'm not going to have like a singled out hitter in this game, most likely. It's more of a stacking situation and hoping that the other pitcher blows up.
Yep. We mentioned so many good bats in the earlier portion of this slate where I don't feel like you have to go here. Toronto heading to San Francisco to take on Madison Bumgarner, who I'm guessing that you're just wanting to talk about here because you did mention it.
Well, I just feel like he's one of the safer options today. We've got the Blue Jays, who strike out a ton, who get one of the biggest ballpark downgrades you could possibly have by going from the Rogers Center to AT&T Ballpark. And them going from there to San Francisco has had people wanting to roster guys like Jake Peavy against them. But now we actually have I did not recommend Jake Peavy, but I know a lot of people did. But now we have a pitcher who's actually good against the Blue Jays. He's a lefty, sure, but he's an elite lefty. So I think that you can use Bumgarner here, and on a slate that's so short like this, you could even use him in your cash games. I know it's crazy to say to use a pitcher against a left-handed pitcher against the Blue Jays in cash games, but with Bumgarner, I'm seriously considering it.
Yeah. So I just, every time we do the show, I mention 3 guys that on fantasy draft that you want to have in cash games, and Bumgarner is my 3rd guy. He's expensive on fantasy draft, but when you're playing cash games on a 7-game slate, you want to go kind of safe as far as cash games go, because people are going to take chances. Bumgarner, definitely a guy that you want to play in your cash games, and Jeff told you why. I don't have to go into it. He said why. But what's your thoughts on Stroman? In a tournament, I don't feel like we'll play him in cash, but in a tournament, Stroman has not pitched bad, even dating back to last year.
He hasn't pitched bad, and the Giants haven't done as well as I think we thought they would be. I know that they've gotten comparisons to Royals and stuff, and I think you've said that before. I've said that before. JM said that before. Like, they're just a team you don't typically want to take pitchers against, but at the same time, the Giants haven't been what we expected them to be. I know there was a point where no hitter on their roster, or Angel Pagan was the only hitter on the roster batting above 300. So it's like, obviously, you can't be too scared to take pitchers against them. And in this ballpark, of course, it's great for pitchers. Not as much in the day. It'll be interesting to see what the wind's doing, how hot it is, that sort of thing, because the ball can get out a little more in the daytime. But certainly Stroman in consideration in tournaments.
Yeah, it's supposed to be mid-60s. Wind looks neutral right now. It's the night before, of course. Degrees wouldn't probably change that much. Stroman, $7,700 on FanDuel. I feel like he's going to be really popular when you're looking at kind of getting exposure to Coors Field. Just take that as however you want to take it. If you want to take a shot on Stroman, I'm not against it. I'm just expecting him to be higher than what we're used to seeing for a guy like Stroman. So let's talk some bats in this game. Bumgarner is Bumgarner. Is there anybody that you want to target here against him?
Well, Donaldson would be the one guy, right? But I think that will be kind of the cute move, like people getting a little bit too cute and trying to be contrarian. And if it were in Toronto, I would be all about it. I'd be like, yeah, that's a really cool move. Like, I respect that. But at AT&T Ballpark, if it's like you said, it's in the 60s or whatever, and the wind's not really much of a factor or anything, then I don't think I can even get behind Donaldson on a short slate against Bumgarner lefty.
I love taking Donaldson against lefties, but I don't know if I could do it. If I end up running some, 5-10 teams, he's just too good not to have on one team if you're going to run that many teams. I feel like it'll be a one-off play. But, gosh, Donaldson is just so good against lefties. If there's one guy, like, if Bumgarner has a game where he goes like 7 innings, gives up a few hits and 1 earned run, I expect that 1 earned run to be a Donaldson homer.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm telling you, like, the problem is I don't think it's going to be as very contrarian. Like, it'll be somewhat contrarian. It'll be low owned, but he won't be like the 2 or 3% like you think you're going to get him at on a short slate. I think everyone's going to try and look for that angle to be contrarian, so it might take a lot of the value out of it. But I couldn't knock someone for trying it. Like I said, I'd be all about it if it were in Toronto. I think just the ballpark is the main thing scaring me away.
Any thoughts on the Giants bats? One guy that I would play in a tournament on any slate is Crawford, just because shortstop is so limited for upside, and Crawford has 2 home run upside any night. What's your thoughts here on the Giants?
Well, he doesn't have 2 home run upside at AT&T Ballpark probably, but with Triples Alley, certainly, he has upside there. And then, of course, they can knock doubles off the wall, that right field wall. But, I'm a huge Crawford fan. I think that he's always criminally underowned, a very high upside shortstop, and not go at all. I do like the lefties in this matchup, again, except for the ballpark. I would be looking at Brandon Belt, Crawford. I just don't know if they really have that much home run upside in San Francisco.
A lot of good fair points there. I like a lot of the hitters from the early parts of the slate here. I don't know how much I'm going to take from these two last games that we talked about. Let's play some home run derby, Jeff. I don't know where me and you stand as far as it goes. You've joined me enough where I kind of have you separate than a lot of other people, you and Hoop. So I have to update it. I have it all written down here in front of me on a couple pages of the notebook. But I'll let you go first here. Give me a guy that you like for a home run on this early slate.
Again, Stevie, we have to assume that I'm winning. That's the way I roll.
It's probably true. Probably true.
I'm just playing with you. I'm gonna take a roll of the dice. I know there's a Coors Field game and everything, but I'm gonna roll the dice. Hope that the Chicago game plays, and that the wind is blowing out. And I'm gonna go with Rizzo.
Rizzo, it is for you. I'm gonna go Odor, and then I'm gonna follow it up with Machado.
No Coors Field, huh?
Nah, I don't even think I'm going to go Coors with my last one, as long as you don't take him here when I have him written down.
I'll go Goldschmidt then, and I guess Arenado. I like my chances. I win. Rizzo, Arenado, and Goldschmidt. I win.
All right, well, I'm going to stick to my plan and go a little bit more contrarian like I originally thought I was going to, even though I'm going to probably be down here a couple home runs. I'm going to go Jonathan Scope and take another guy from Baltimore. I like this matchup here against Hughes. If I'm gonna target somebody, I might as well target the guy that's given up the highest home run to 9 to right-handed bats in the slate.
I like it, man. That's bold. I like it.
Pitcher that's going to pick up a win here at the end of the day. Doesn't have to score the most fantasy points, but he's going to have a win in the win column here on this early slate. Who would it be?
Bumgarner.
That's just really chalky, Jeff.
Yep.
We should call you Jeff Chalk El Jefe. I think that's what I'm going to start introing, Going Coors with two people and then, taking the biggest favorite on the board. I'm going to go Kyle Hendricks. I'm going to stick to my guns here. I'm going to play him on FanDuel quite a bit here on the slate. So that's the guy that I'm feeling that's going to definitely pick up a win. Jeff, it's always a pleasure to work with you, my friend. It's Jeff K. Collins on Twitter, correct?
Correct.
I got it right this time. And didn't screw it up. Well, I wish you the best of luck. I hope you get a Frazier home run here. And when people are listening to this podcast on Wednesday, that they're talking about, hey, Jeff El Jefe locked up another seat.
Me too, man. I hope that ends up working out. And regarding the chalk thing, I'm very chalky in cash games. So considering this is like a head-to-head between you and myself, I'm going to be very chalky. And I'll save the contrarianness for trying to win the monster.
Sounds good, my friend. It doesn't look like it's going to be anything for me as Dung Ho Lee or whatever his name is hit a 3-run blast off Smiley. That's how it ends when you're not going to have, you just know things are not going your way when that happens, right?
I did not see that one coming. I must admit that.
Yeah, I didn't see that one coming as well. So, all right, my friend, it was fun. And we'll be back on Thursday with an 8-game slate. And I think I'm solo on Thursday. The lady doesn't know it yet, but I'm taking her to the beach for our anniversary. So I'll be solo on Thursday. I'll be back. So thanks for Jeff for joining me here today. And we'll see you tomorrow.